With me is member of the European Parliament, Mr. Michael McNamara, who is also the co-chair of the working group on AI in the European Parliament. Welcome to WION, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here in Delhi.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here for this conclave. Thank you.
Let me first start about AI, and then I will, of course, go on the conclave as well. Now, AI is something that is seen as the new frontier. The Indian Prime Minister was in Europe, in France, for the AI meeting as well. So, first, if you can give a perspective, the European perspective on AI, especially an act that has been passed in the European Parliament, which I believe is the first in the world.
Yes, it's certainly the first major piece of legislation in the world governing the issue of AI. It was passed by the last mandate before the latest European elections, which took place in June of last year. It's now in an implementation phase, so the European Commission primarily have to implement it, but also our member states across the European Union. Obviously, it's important that it's implemented fully, but equally that it's implemented uniformly across the European Union, that we don't have a fragmentation. Because that, I suppose, there was in the United States an executive order passed by the last president, Joe Biden. The current president has repealed that executive order, but now individual pieces of legislation are being proposed in various states, which the upside of that is, of course, protection for consumers, protection against risk. The downside is because it's at a state level that you can get fragmentation.
Mm-hmm. So, some key features of this act that can be a template for such laws across the world, including perhaps here in India?
Well, specifically with regard to publishing, I suppose, which is what this conclave is about, anything that's AI generated has to indicate that it's AI generated. If it's a deep fake, it has to indicate that it's a deep fake. It's not banned per se at all, but it has to indicate it so that people who are looking at it will know that it's generated not by a journalist like yourself, but rather by a computer, and that it's AI generated. In an Irish context, for the first time, there was a general election. I'm Irish, I'm from Ireland. Last November there was a general election, and an election candidate who herself actually was a newscaster who was running for election. Deep fakes were circulated of her naked, which were obviously very distressing to her and considerably damaging. So we do see that this issue is more and more important, AI, and how we deal with it, because it becomes more and more pervasive in our lives and has the potential to impact elections, not just in the way I've described, but even its legitimate use is also being used more and more in elections. It obviously has a lot of uses across journalism and the media more generally, but equally it carries with it, like all technologies, it carries with it certain risks.
Mm-hmm. So the Digital News Publishers Association, the conclave is happening here in Delhi. What are you looking forward to it, and what inputs perhaps you can give in terms of AI? You've already pointed out that there should be an advisory that this material is AI generated. Are you going to pursue that at the conclave as well?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't dare to tell India what should be in its laws. I mean, that's very much a matter for legislators here. What I'm looking forward to is hearing Indian perspectives on this, because obviously India, there is almost an AI race in the world now between the United States on the one hand, China on the other, and India, like Europe, finds itself in between the two, and I suppose it has this centre position in the world in many regards, and including in AI. Of course, India signed the declaration at the AI summit in Paris earlier this month. Mm-hmm. It is assuming a leadership role in AI. It's assuming a leadership role in the world more generally, but including in that in AI. So I'm looking forward to hearing the perspectives of digital news publishers in India. Certainly not going to be telling them what should be in their laws, but I'm happy to say, to outline what is in this European law. This is an example, but obviously it's completely for India and India alone to determine what will be in its legislation.
Mm-hmm. In fact, India is going to host a summit on AI that was announced in Paris later this year. But essentially, what's your view about the European-Indian cooperation on AI? As you pointed out, that there is the Chinese world, there is the American world, and there is a new world which is emerging, which is European-Indian. So if you can give your perspective on that.
Well, as I speak here today, I'm aware that the European Commission President and indeed all of the commissioners are coming here tomorrow, which is a huge statement of intent about cooperation with India. India produces a huge amount of human capital in general terms, but specifically with regard to engineers, computer engineers, who not all of whom are working in India at the moment, many of whom would have gone to the United States. But that's something that is a similar phenomenon in Europe, where we produce a very large number of graduates, we produce a large number of engineering graduates, but many of them end up going to the United States to develop innovation there. And I suppose India, like Europe, is looking to develop its own innovation, looking to develop its own hubs, looking to develop its own large language models, and looking not to, essentially, that it not become a two-horse race, that this become that Europe and India take their place in AI, because I suppose there's a lot of discussion around it. There's a lot of discussion around what it will mean. Some say, well, maybe it's not a bad thing if we don't assume this because of the risks involved. But I disagree with that. As I say, I'm Irish. Ireland was left behind by the Industrial Revolution, but that doesn't mean it wasn't affected by the Industrial Revolution. It very much was. India was affected by the Industrial Revolution because it unleashed economic and philosophical forces that had an impact right across the world. So, I don't think saying that we're not going to get involved is an option for states. I think most states want to be at the frontier, want to be at the cutting edge, and want to avail of the benefits that it offers. Some states see risks that they will want to curtail. Others, like the United States, see less risk and think that that's undue interference by governments. But again, that's an approach for every state to take in itself.
Perhaps asking more, not on the AI itself, but on the global geopolitical order, asking you as an MEP, how much Trump's presence in the United States impact the European security? How does Europe see a world where there is no American backing, not as much American backing as it has been in the past, and how much it impacts the trade policies as well, given that there is always a worry of tariffs from the American side by the Trump administration on Europe?
Well, I suppose we don't know what impact yet it will have on trade policy. I mean, there's a lot of threats being made, but we don't know what yet will happen. As regards the security situation, obviously, the German state had elections very recently, and the newly elected, or the man who's expected to be elected as Chancellor, said that Europe will have to forge its own way. But I suppose I come at it from a slightly different perspective. I'm Irish. It's a neutral state. It's always been a neutral state. We've sought to find a middle way in the world, in much the same way as India has. Obviously not on the world stage that India is on, but certainly to maintain its own independent position. That is under threat in my own state. There's a lot of discussion about the need to develop European defence alliances. It's, I think, very much thrown the doors of that discussion very much open now for discussion. States that are further east in the European Union would have a very different perspective to mine on security and on the need for defence alliances for obvious historical reasons.
Mm-hmm. And do you see the war in Europe, the Ukraine war, coming to an end?
I certainly hope so. I mean, thousands, if not millions, of young Ukrainian, primarily men, have died on the front. Young Russian men have died on the front, and there have been huge civilian losses in both states as well. I certainly hope it can be brought to an end in a just and sustainable way, such that peace will sustain rather than have a temporary ceasefire that ends up being broken and going back to the trenches again.
What's your perspective on usage of AI in war zones? Because this could be a reality very soon. I mean, drones was something that was talked about in the past. Today, drone is a reality in conflicts, in war. So what's your view on that?
Well, it's very early days, but I mean, I've seen a lot of reporting around the war in, well, not the conflict in Gaza, and a lot of media reporting around very extensive use of AI in that regard. It is alarming in a variety of ways because of the lack of, in some cases, I mean, obviously there can be human oversight, there can be human override. I've read allegations, but some of those allegations have been denied by the Israeli Defense Forces. But certainly it's not a matter of in the future we will have AI in war. It's now, it's happening. But the nature of war is that, you know, belligerents tend not to be very open about what they're actually doing. They're not very open about the technology they're utilising, but it is quite clear at this stage that AI is being used in conflicts and used very extensively in drones as well, as you mentioned, but even beyond that, in the selection of targets, in a wide variety of uses.
My last question, very briefly, what's your view about the Department of Government Efficiency, the Trump's new focus on, led by Elon Musk?
I'm Irish, not American. I mean, some people say Ireland's the 51st state; it's an independent state. I have no view on the internal operations of the United States. I wish the new administration well, though, in its task.
Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to WION. It was lovely speaking to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
With video journalist Abhishek Siddhansibal for WION in New Delhi.